Back in for another episode of Battery Power. Cory McCartney along with Grant McAuley, and our StockWatch series continues with what's been a familiar storyline for the Braves for the better part of a decade. The veteran added to the rotation, and the Braves has had success with the likes of Anibal Sanchez, and if you really want to dial it back, Irvin Santana and Aaron Herrera. But Grant, no pitcher at 30 plus has ever posted a better fWAR than what the Braves got out of Charlie Morton in the 2021 season.
They got everything that they paid for and then some. And of course, that's one of the big reasons they went ahead and locked him up for another season. But when you talk about the leadership that this rotation needed, it goes beyond Max Fried. I mean, we talked about him and have talked about all the things that he did for this rotation. But without Charlie Morton, you also have to wonder where in the world would the Braves rotation have been in another season where they were trying to fill the back end of the rotation, and Mike Soroka suffered a setback, re-tearing his Achilles. So you knew you needed Charlie Morton regardless of what was happening with Soroka this year. But as it happens, Charlie Morton was able to bounce back after the shortened season and prove that he was very much the pitcher who became one of the best in the American League, really one of the best, probably 10 right-handers in baseball prior to that for about a 3 or 4 year run. And this was a guy that Braves fans knew, but the guy that came back after his rookie season, being traded away to Pittsburgh long ago, over a decade ago, this is a totally different pitcher, totally different man, and he's exactly what the Braves needed, and he pitched like it all season long. Really, the only blemish for Charlie Morton was something he couldn't control, and that was taking a line drive off his leg in the World Series. But you have to love what you saw in year one from Charlie Morton and want more of the same, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Oh, the numbers on Morton: a 3.34 ERA, 14 wins in 33 starts, 185 and 2/3 inning, 10.47 Ks per nine, a paltry 2.8 walks per nine. I mentioned his Fangraph WAR, stacked amongst other 30-something Brave starters. That was a 4.6, and across Morton's 14-year career, he was better just once in 2019 with the Royals at 6.0, and then the postseason in which he pitched a 3.24 ERA, had a 183 batting average against. You mentioned he came to an unfortunate end, but at the same time, I mean, that game one of the World Series moment, it also kind of adds a new definition to tough when you think about throwing 16 pitches with a broken leg. Again, as you mentioned, the Braves liked it so much, they're bringing him back, a 22 deal for $20 million, an option for 2023 at another $20 million. So Grant, what about Morton's 2021? Are you high on him taking into 2022?
Well, I want to talk about that World Series moment because I think you hit on something right there. That was a moment that galvanized the Braves in the World Series because things could have gone very poorly after that. But instead of it, it continued to be the next man up and the bullpen continuing to give the Braves big time innings and then having to be very resourceful as you got to the next time Charlie Morton was supposed to pitch, which of course isn't going to happen again until sometime this year, hopefully sooner than later if we can get everything settled. But be that as it may, what I saw from Charlie Morton in 2021 was just nothing short of one of the better strikeout seasons ever put in by a Braves starting pitcher. Only the 15th season of 200-plus strikeouts by a Braves starter in franchise history. Only the 9th different man to do that, but 2 strikeout records for Charlie Morton in 2021 among qualified starters in the 150 years of Atlanta Braves baseball. And just think about the 90s for just a hot second. With the guys that the Braves had there, 3 of them in the Hall of Fame, the highest strikeout percentage, 28.6 for Charlie Morton, doing that at age 37. And then those 10.47 strikeouts per nine. He is the only Atlanta Braves starting pitcher, qualified starter, to ever have 10 or more strikeouts per nine in a season. It was an incredible run for Charlie Morton, and you hate the way that it ended, but you love the fact that the Braves were able to, answer and find ways to get around it. And you just hope that Charlie Morton's able to rehab that leg and come back stronger than ever, just pick up really where he left off. And that is what has me high on the 2022 deal that they have for him, and seeing if Charlie Morton wants to continue to do this year for year, because Cory, he's only gotten better with age, which is not typically the thing we're talking about when Father Time comes up on this podcast.
So he's going into his age 38 season. And since the Braves moved to Atlanta in 1966, the only players that produced a Fangraph WAR season of 4+ are 2 Hall of Famers in Phil Niekro and John Smoltz. They both did it 3 times. I think Morton, though, I mean, I'm not saying he's going to get to that level, but I think he can certainly challenge for it. He just remains so incredibly difficult to square up. He allowed a 32.5% hard hit rate last season, which was in the 90th percentile of all starters. The same with a 4.9% barrel rate. And you think about that ageless arsenal. I mean, a 95.5 four-seamer is not going to blow anybody away, but you mix in that curveball with 98% in terms of spin, had a 127 batting average against that pitch. Pitchers are, we know this, pitchers are no longer defined by wins in this era, but it's worth noting that he had 14 wins and Max Fried had 14 wins. And that gave the Braves their first duo to both reach that plateau since Irvin Santana and Julio Teheran in 2014. And I think I've already reached our quota of Irvin Santana mentions for the entire 2020. I don't know if I should celebrate, go grab a baseball and smell it or something, but, certainly, what they got out of him and what, I think they're setting the stage for. To me, the arsenal is just ageless. And you mentioned it. He continues to age very well in terms of what he's able to do. And I think the reason you look at him being so productive going into an age 38 season is because, again, the stuff just plays so well regardless of his age.
Yeah, and it's similar to what we talked about with Max Fried, only just more strikeouts for Charlie Morton. And this is really kind of the book that you'd like to see Fried be able to follow as he gets a little bit older and continues to, take his arsenal to the next level. But it's not giving up a lot of hits, not giving up a lot of hard contact, keeping the ball in the ballpark, not walking many guys, and missing a lot of bats. That combination for Charlie Morton, you mentioned the percentiles that he's in for some of those stats, and the metrics really bear out why it is he is successful. And again, the Braves were just in a place where I felt like they had to add veteran starting pitching. They got to the doorstep of the World Series in 2020, having to patchwork their rotation all year long. They had to do it again in 2021, but to a bit of a lesser extent, because at least you had some, I would say constants, not variables, but you had some constants there, and Charlie Morton was one of them. So I'm excited to see what he's able to do. Hopefully, bouncing back from the setback that was the broken leg in the World Series. I know that it was probably killing Charlie to have to sit there and watch as his team went out there to, try to battle off an Astros club that a lot of people said whoever wins the National League is just going to get beat up by this Astros offense. Charlie Morton, he might have, had that early departure that you couldn't have planned for, but for the Braves overall, I think, again, it was a galvanizing moment because it just showed that if he can compete like that, I think that's inspirational for everybody else to say, okay, I'm going to come in here, pick up where he left off, and make things happen. And hopefully we can see a little bit less of that in 2022 in terms of Charlie missing the innings he's supposed to be throwing, but the carryover effect and the confidence that has to come from just a variety of reasons when you've got a starter like this in your rotation and what he brings overall and a wealth of knowledge to some of the other pitchers, starters or relievers. It's just a great arm to have. And the Braves are happy to see this Charlie Morton come back after kind of a long and a winding road through Pittsburgh and through Philly and then ultimately through Houston, where he took that big step forward, Tampa Bay, where he continued his dominance, and now back home in Atlanta, hopefully to bookend his career and help the Braves continue to be contenders in the National League East, the National League, and in that World Series on that big stage, because I know Charlie wants to get back there after what happened last October.
Well, one of the unfortunate byproducts of the current MLB lockout is that the players just have a lack of access to both their team facilities and their team doctors. And that means players rehabbing like Charlie Morton. I mean, they're not getting that treatment that they would get under normal circumstances. I mean, it's a disaster. It's something that Morton himself has discussed publicly, saying that, he can't even mail his x-ray disc to the Braves to have this looked at. And I'm not saying that he's not going to be ready for opening day, and every indication is that he's going to. It's just something to watch. Like how does that kind of impact his getting ready, whenever spring training does start. But he did run into some trouble in 2021 with the sinker, which resulted in a 389 weighted on base average against. The same with the cutter at 357. But I mean, it ultimately doesn't matter when the curveball is that good and in the way it elevates his fastball. I mean, this has been the quota for him for years now. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think whatever you want to get caught up in and maybe what wasn't perfect about Charlie Morton in 2021, I mean, this is who he is. And I think that's why it's hard to have a lot of concerns about him going into the 22 season.
I'd agree with that. And when you think about it, nobody's going to have 4 elite level pitches or better than average pitches. When you do, you're on a very short list. But I think it's important for Charlie when he does have a fastball that he's able to command more times than not in terms of his four-seamer, and he's got that dynamite breaking ball, just being able to show something different to hitters. Yeah, they might pick on it every once in a while and get some hits against him, but you bear it out, look at all of the numbers. They weren't doing enough against it, even if those were the pitches where a little bit of damage was done. I do think it's important to just have that extra wrinkle every once in a while where you are going to throw this off-speed pitch or a different variation of your fastball. But Charlie doesn't need 5 or 6 pitches to be successful. He's got 2 that's going to put him on the road to being a guy that's going to pile up strikeouts and hopefully innings and help the Braves get right back in the Fall Classic.
Steamer projections have Morton with a 3.69 ERA, 3.62 FIP, 9.93 Ks per nine, 2.8 walks per nine, and a 3.2 FanGraph WAR, numbers that are just a tick below where he delivered this last season. But of course, those FanGraph projections, those they kind of take that more from like the mean and just go a little bit above it. They're not obviously going to be forecasting anybody having a career year, especially a guy going into his 38th season. But I don't think you can underscore the importance of him in this rotation. Certainly, there's still uncertainty around Mike Soroka. What are the Braves going to do past that top 3? With Ian Anderson along with Fried and Charlie Morton. What it means to have that consistency at the top? I just don't think you can say enough against. So I think that the way you want to look at Charlie Morton for this next year is the value of just that consistency at the top. I think whatever projections are out there, that to me is the biggest piece of the puzzle with him.
Yeah, and in my own long-winded way earlier, I think I was trying to get to that point. But yeah, I mean, you really can't understate how just valuable Charlie Morton is. And I'll tell you, if those are the numbers that he puts up, the ones that are projected, I think you kind of have to be happy with that at the very least as a baseline for what he's capable of. And I think you could outperform it as well. But if that's what you're signing up for and you're the Braves, I think you'd go ahead and take that. But what you do want is healthy Charlie Morton on a run through October, pitching the biggest games. That's what the Braves got him for. In addition to helping them get there, it's what you do once you are under the brightest lights.
Well, we are far from done here on Battery Power as we continue to set the stage for the Braves 22 title defense. And if you've missed any of our Stock Watch series, go check out the Talking Chop YouTube channel. You can find them all there. And while you're there, of course, subscribe, turn on those notifications so you get an alert every time that we drop a new episode. Until next time, I'm Cory McCartney. He's Grant McAuley, and we'll see you in Braves Country.